Welcome to the latest HIIT workout. Today's topic is segmentation cubes, which is obviously by request. I actually like this topic for a number of reasons. In terms of business models, it's something that is seen as really quite simple, but actually, as is often the way, the sophistication comes with the analysis and the application. And so we're going to try and deconstruct the segmentation cube, but also apply it and reconstruct it using a real life example. And today we'll be using Salesforce as that example. So without further ado, I will carry on. If I could ask anybody that's just joined and is still unmuted to just turn off your microphone, that would be fantastic. So just a very lightning introduction to myself. I'm Paul Innes. I run intensive marketing. As you can see from the bottom of this slide, I split my time between corporates in big buildings, startups hanging out in cool places, and incubators. I do some work with the University of Oxford, that is the Bridge of Sighs. There's also one in Cambridge and Venice, by the way. And on the right-hand side is the elderly picture. I also give my time to a small charity as well. Moving on to today's workout routine. So as usual, the method is to deconstruct a model or a way of looking at some business challenge. We'll have a diversion, as always, and we'll divert into where to play. As always, we'll talk about what informs this and what it informed, and we'll reconstruct with Salesforce. I have the chat open. Please do use the chat. It's kind of your virtual Sharpie. At the end of this session, we'll cool down and stretch off, otherwise known as your questions and answers. So let's get into segmentation cubes. It's unlikely you'll see this in the textbook because I created this myself when working with clients. And the reason why I did this is because segmentation often is seen as an oversimplistic way of looking at market opportunities or how customers break down into categories. And the reality is that segments are actually often multi-dimensional. And the other key reality is that unless you really peel back the layers of the segments, then you're not really going to be able to build a targeted and meaningful proposition that will resonate with. So often when you look at these, when we break this cube down, you'll see by unpacking them, you will see similarities and differences. So for purposes of display, I'm going to unpack it using 3 slides. So let's start with customers. And interestingly, customers are really complex creatures. So a couple of things on the slide here. Firstly, I've given some examples of who are they? And there are ways of looking at customers. The first thing I will say with this dimension, and indeed every model, is make these dimensions and the way you analyze it pertinent to your business. These are some classic examples, and we'll use these a bit later when we do Salesforce. So customers can be quite broad. And so to really understand their problems, sometimes you need to hone in on their characteristics a little bit more. So you really need to be quite specific about who they are, and we'll come to where they are and what they need in a moment. Typically, you might start quite broad. So is it a user or a chooser or a buyer? Is it business to business, business to consumer? You might start looking at demographics. And then you start to get into more psychographic aspects in terms of how they think, behave, act, do, and who influences them. Now, interesting, there is a very useful approach for this, which is called personas, which is a way of kind of building a view of a typical customer or a market group together. So that's kind of how you think about customers. So if I give a very quick example at the moment. I've been doing some work this week with a ventilator company that is coming out of Oxford, King's College and Nephew, and they're looking at a fit for purpose ventilator to respond to the pandemic that we know we're all working with today. Now, the reality is what does that look like in terms of the customer groups across the world, and who are they, how they behave, what have they got, and so on. It's a really good way of thinking. It's just fundamentally providing air to help somebody to survive. But when you look at it and break it down, there are different characteristics based on who they are, where they are, and what they need. So let's move on to where they are. So the other thing that is really a challenge when we do segmentation is people think about where they are, it's geography. Oh, they're in China, or they're the French market. And to be honest, that can work sometimes, but often it's not enough. You need to understand where they are. That could also be the industry that they work in, maybe the business size that they're at, or indeed the channel in which you may reach them. And that's quite important, because if you're building a proposition, sometimes you're not building it for the end user, you may be building it for the person that sells to that end user. Equally, it could be with regards to the stage of the buying cycle that they are at. Is there a group of customers that are completely unaware that they have this need, and a group of customers that understand that they've got that need? And they will be different, and you may want to adapt to them, both in terms of your proposition, everything in terms of price incentives, to how you might talk to them, to indeed what you might put in your product for free. I think we've probably all experienced some cloud-based product these days where you get something for free to start in order for you to continue. And that's a good example of how people are adapting based on where they are in the sales cycle. Let me give you a very good example. If you're ever looking to go onto a subscription for an online service, please clear out your cookies, because they know that if you've looked before, that they're not going to give you the best voucher code. And that also includes buying personas and the decision-making unit. That's what DMU stands for. So understand that, are you selling to an FD, or are you selling to the end user? Very important. Then this for me is probably the most overlooked yet the most important dimension of the segmentation cube, which is what they need. And so those that maybe on this presentation that work with me in the incubator will know that I have a very simple mantra. If there is no pain, there is no value. And if there's no value, there's no demand. And if you have no demand, then you fundamentally have no business opportunity. And so really understand what is driving the customer in terms of what is it that the pain removal, what problems have they got, and how you solve them, or where they're looking to be in a different place. What do they want to have as a different experience, a different way of life, or indeed a different outcome for their business. Sometimes a good method to look at this, and this is something to look at maybe beyond this session, is something called Jobs to be Done. Jobs to be Done is a very good framework that was built by a gentleman called Clayton Christensen. Unfortunately, recently passed, but he was a professor of Harvard, and he coined the phrase disruptive innovation. And he identified that actually things that are cheaper, quicker, faster, and easier to use typically get a better uptake. And so by focusing on what really matters and where the pain is vital. Okay, keeping going with the speed. How does this fit into what decisions you make? So previous sessions, we've talked about where to play, how to win, and what you need. And that's very much your strategy going forward. And so it's really clear that from a market point of view, this is where you play. But you need to also, as you understand it and break it down, it still needs to be big enough. It still needs to be well defined. You still need to be able to reach it, service it. There needs to be some money in it. And also you need to be able to compete. So once you've understood the characteristics of that market, you need to understand the characteristics of your business and your offer. So moving on to what informs segmentation and what segmentation informs, as you can imagine, there's a lot of insights, data and trends that are going to go into the cube, but I'll leave that for the time being. I really want to focus on what it informs. So segmentation is right in the middle of strategy. It's going to help you inform strategic decisions. Where to play could be a market entry strategy, and that could be a geography, which is a significant investment for many companies. Or it could be customer selection, to choose to serve one customer over another. It could be where you prioritize what goes into your product and the investments you make, or how you build your marketing propositions, or indeed the pricing tools that you use. So segmentation actually isn't just about understanding customers, it's about a basis for making key strategic decisions going forward for the business. Okay, so let's unpack it for Salesforce. For those that you maybe don't know, Salesforce are huge. They started out as a small cloud-based CRM system for small to medium enterprises. They are now a global leader used by everyone, as you can see here from this model. And so what I've done here is I've just thought about Salesforce in terms of how they may use a segmentation cube to determine who they are, where they are, and what they need. And I've taken two markets I know they operate in. One is automotive and one is charity. And as you can see here against who they are, there's some similarities and differences. Whilst this is a business-to-business proposition, one is for a multinational, yet one is for a small charity. One's need and aims and outcomes is to make money and sell to drivers, whereas one's outcomes and aims are to make a difference and to speak to donors. In terms of automotive, it's probably a global operation. I suspect that they're operating in headquarters in North America or in Germany or in the UK or Japan. And they're where they are in their stages, they are targeting consumers. And they're likely, in terms of their buying cycle, to select the CRM on sophistication, the fact that it gives them a competitive advantage. And they're likely to have enterprise account manager, whereas our charity is going to be domestic operations. They are really targeting volunteers and givers, a different a different customer group. They're probably looking at the CRM based on its simplicity. They don't have an army of people to do all fancy coding and reports. They just need to run the charity efficiently, and they're probably operating in online communities. And what they need will be different. So clearly in an automotive world, they need customer loyalty, but to thrive, whereas a charity will need donor loyalty, but to survive. An automotive company may be interested in digital transformation, selling cars online and blending their offline and online offer, whereas a charity just simply needs to connect just giving to their website and back into the Salesforce product. As you can see, automotive are competing for share of wallet, whereas actually charities are competing for attention. And fundamentally, automotive companies are promoting their cars and showing off the gizmos, whereas charities are saying thank you and showing that they care. So that's maybe how you might unpack and see two different cubes form for the same company operating in different markets. So there's a bonus slide that I've put in here, because what does that really mean in terms of Salesforce.com? So I've put one extra, and I don't like to do this too much. I like to keep these short and sharp, but this is the same company with different propositions. For those of you that don't know, there's Salesforce.com and Salesforce.org. And on the left-hand side, which is blue, are all the things in the core product, the added value product, and the service layer, which is known as the augmented product, which is what this diagram shows. And on the green side, it's for the charity. So let me just pick out a couple of things. It's free advice for charities in the service layer, yet it's highly paid innovation consultants in the automotive layer. From a charity's perspective, they really are just want email and the ability to communicate, whereas maybe in the automotive world, they're expecting integration into artificial intelligence, possibly predictive analytics, augmented reality services to help digitally transform. And if you think about how they bring those communities together, so from a corporation point of view, Dreamforce is the massive conference where people pay a fortune to go to San Francisco. Well, maybe not quite in the future, but they paid a fortune to go to San Francisco to go to Dreamforce to hear how businesses are evolving. Whereas it's a more friendly foundation that helps and guides charities to get the best out of what they're given. And as you can imagine, the product is different, the pricing is different, the proposition is different, and the service layer offerings are different. And that all comes from understanding a different segmentation cube. So that's it. As promised, one business model, deconstructed, explained, reconstructed, applied. Next week, again, by request, I'll be covering customer lifetime value, which links nicely into loyalty. You've got my contact details. You would have had my email if you subscribed, and you can see a little bit more about what we do. One last shout out before we do any questions and answers is that please do fill out the Minty survey if you can, 548408. It's 2 minutes, it's 3 questions, it helps me. And you can ask what you would like me to cover in future, which hopefully today you'll realize is I take seriously and I respond. So on that basis, I will now stop the recording and open for questions.